Okay, greetings, salutations, libertarians. Welcome to episode 3 of Conversations with Libertarians, a podcast by the Libertarian Party UK. Today I have with us Alex. Now, Alex is well known to the Libertarian Party, but for those people that have never come across the party or just have this is their first video that they're watching, Alex, welcome to the show, and can you give yourself a brief introduction for our listeners?
Thank you very much, Dylan. So I'm Alex Shahovsky. I'm the leader of the UK Libertarian Party. I was our candidate at the last general election in North East Hampshire, hoping to stand in the Hampshire mayoralty election next May, and very excited to be here on the podcast. Thank you for having me, Dylan.
It's great to have you. So today we want to have a special focus on the Online Safety Act because this has been a very big topic of discussion over the last few weeks and months as it's come into policy, right? Let's start with the phrase, if you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear. This phrase is quite common. Why do you think it's misleading? And what are the implications for individual freedom and liberty?
So that phrase, if you've done nothing wrong, you've got nothing to hide, it's not just misleading, it is in fact profoundly naive. So it relies on a couple of core assumptions. The first of these is that the state is benevolent. If you have nothing to fear, that suggests that whatever it is that might cause that fear is by definition no threat to you. We've seen throughout history that the state is often a cause of evil and of authoritarian tendencies. So that's the first problem, the first assumption there. The second assumption is that you will never have anything to hide. And perhaps there is a case in which people would need to hide from the state when laws are passed that are unjust, when, God forbid, certain minority groups are rounded up or speech is policed, as it is increasingly being in the UK. So if you genuinely believe that if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear, you are giving up your privacy entirely to the state. The second assumption is that privacy has no value in itself. Even if we accept that the government has our best interests at heart, we still need to hang on to the fact that privacy in itself has value. Why should you have to tell the state who you are, where you are, what you're doing, what you're buying, if you are a law-abiding citizen? There's no reason for it. And this is a mantra that we hear rolled out time and time again by our police services and by our authoritarian leftist politicians and those on the right as well. The Conservative Party, for example, have put up a number of candidates who are openly in favour of, for example, facial recognition technology. So there's those two assumptions. Number one, the state is good. Not always true. And number two, that privacy has no value in itself. Libertarians reject both of these assumptions, and therefore we reject this type of authoritarian reasoning.
Awesome. And I think the rebuttal to that is, what's the alternative? Right? And so from the libertarian perspective, it's often emphasized that it's down to individual responsibility with minimal state interference, right? Which is what you're saying. It should be down to the individual, but they need to be responsible. But let's break it down a little bit further. How does unchecked state surveillance undermine the core principles of libertarianism?
So if we believe that the individual is sovereign, there needs to be very, very good reasons for the state to pry into the life of the individual. So there needs to be, to begin with, some level of suspicion of wrongdoing independent of surveillance. You cannot surveil people on the potential risk that they could be a criminal. That's what we're doing when we're going down the lines of the Online Safety Act and facial recognition technology. We're taking a brush, painting everyone with it. You are a potential criminal. For libertarians, that is an invasion of privacy. So there needs to be some element of suspicion in terms of what that person has done in the past, what laws they may have broken, so on and so forth, rather than treating everyone as a criminal, which is what state surveillance does. If you were sitting on the bus reading a book and a police officer got up, stood behind you, leant over your shoulder and started reading over your shoulder, you would feel perturbed. You would feel that someone has invaded your personal space. And yet when it comes to the internet, it's suddenly okay. But that's exactly what the Online Safety Act brings into play. Someone checking their emails or browsing Wikipedia is getting on with their life. They are not harming anybody. So the state has no right to be reading, to be prying over their shoulder. It's quite simply wrong. So if we hold the individual to be sovereign, which as libertarians we do, that's our core principle, there needs to be very, very good reasons for a collective of other individuals, the state, to be prying into the personal lives of citizens. And so state surveillance in that regard does not respect the privacy of the individual, and it is quite frankly an affront to human rights and the right to privacy.
Yes, agreed. So, I mean, how does mass surveillance impact for us as libertarians our fundamental human right to privacy? Some might argue that privacy might be a privilege rather than a right. So what would you say to these people?
That's an argument in favour of complete and total surveillance. If you believe that privacy is a privilege, something that can be thrown away whenever an emergency comes along, for example, then you are arguing that the state has the right to know absolutely everything about you at all times. It is an argument for having a camera in your house connected to the local police station. It is an argument for the policeman opening all of your letters, which is precisely what they're doing essentially with our emails. It is an argument, and I do not consider this to be pushing it too far, it is an argument for complete and total surveillance of the human mind. So there have been recent advances in brain imaging and the use of artificial intelligence. Essentially, the original plan with this technology is to help those who are paralyzed from the eyes down to communicate. So we have individuals in hospitals who are now moving cursors on the screen, using their mind. And just last week, there was a breakthrough in that a platform was able almost to map the thoughts of an individual. If you believe that privacy is a privilege, then why not, once that technology becomes online, which I think it will within the next 10, 20 years, why not mandate that everyone's thoughts at all times are given straight to the state in case they're thinking something dodgy? That's the kind of thing that people are advocating for when they say if you've done nothing wrong here.
So too much faith put in the state, too little faith put on the individual or your neighbor, in other words, right? So, but let's touch on technology, because for me, I've noticed the mention of AI in many of these new technologies. And as a user of AI in my businesses and different operations, I know that AI hallucinates. It gets things wrong. So let's talk about technology, specifically facial recognition. Now, this is becoming very widespread, specifically in policing, public spaces, etc. How accurate is it, though? And what are the potential dangers of its misuse? Could facial technology lead to biases, discrimination? We know that's been a big issue in the past. What kind of legal safeguards or transparency measures would a libertarian perspective suggest when it comes to facial recognition software used at mass by the state?
So to answer the second part of your question there, that's a really nice and simple one. Thank you, Dylan. No use of facial recognition technology by the state, full stop. It removes the principle of consent. If a private business wants to use facial recognition technology for security purposes or for advertising, feel free, be my guest, as long as the customers are aware that it's being used and that they can consent to it. Facial recognition technology, like we're seeing this weekend at the Notting Hill Carnival, like we're seeing on our high streets up and down the country, removes the principle of policing by consent. What this technology does is it scans every single person who walks past and compares their face, which was downloaded without their consent from their passport photos. 46 million of them under the last Conservative government uploaded straight to a facial recognition database, and now Labour are uploading even more of them. So your face is uploaded to this database, you walk down the high street to get a pint of milk, and you are labelled a criminal by the state. That's what this technology does. So in terms of legal safeguards, we would not allow facial recognition technology without the consent of the individual. You cannot consent if you're walking down the street and there's a camera there that you weren't aware of. Equally, if you were aware there's a camera there, but you've got to now walk around the block, that's an infringement on your right to travel, on your right to associate, so on and so forth. So the state should not be using facial recognition technology unless there are a certain number of cases in which people consent, for example, for medical treatment or whatever it may be. And so That's the legal safeguards. The police should not be using it, full stop, because it destroys the principle of consent. And in this country, until very recently, we had policing by consent. The Pelian principles of policing, which are in the Libertarian Party manifesto, have been trampled on by the successive Conservative and Labour governments that we've seen in the last few years. So that's in terms of the legal safeguards. And Dylan, could you just remind me what was the first half of your question?
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
sorry.
got, you,
Um,
you want me
uh,
to ask it again, or you got it?
it was about the accuracy of this
Yes,
Orwellian technology, wasn't
correct.
it?
Like
Yes.
AI hallucinates, facial recognition, just any technology, there's going to be a percentage of times that it gets it wrong. Or just any system in general, there's going to be a percentage of miscalculation, recognition in the case of facial recognition. So how does this? What are the implications on freedoms for this? Does that not change the relationship between police and citizen? Like, I know you brought it up, but the presumption of innocence is somehow slanted by using technology that perhaps could get it wrong.
The presumption of innocence is much more than slanted. It's completely hoard to suspicion. That's what facial recognition technology does. It completely and utterly removes the presumption of innocence. And on the topic of accuracy, the the NEC system used by the Met Police, it's being used this weekend in London for the Notting Hill Carnival. It's being used on facial recognition vans, mobile vans that they're deploying across the country. The University of Cambridge did a study, their Centre for Technology and Democracy, and they were unequivocal. It fails to meet legal and ethical standards entirely, the NEC system used by the Met Police. And this same system has exhibited racial bias, particularly those of ethnic minorities are more likely to be flagged as criminals. This technology, for starters, is used more in deprived areas. I struggle to see how this is supposed to improve community relations between the police and the communities in which they operate. When you are deploying racist technology in areas where there's a high proportion of people from ethnic minorities, they're walking down the street, minding their own business, doing whatever they're doing, and they're pulled to the side and accused of being a criminal. Just a couple of weeks ago in London, there was an anti-knife crime campaigner. I forget his name, but this individual was doing work in the community, trying to stop youths from getting involved in knife crime. He was pulled aside after walking past a facial recognition camera and searched on suspicion of carrying a knife. These are the tools that the Metropolitan Police are using up and down the high streets of the United Kingdom. It's an absolute affront to human decency to use this fallible, artificial system that treats everyone as a criminal. Could you imagine if we went back, 30 years and you had police randomly picking people off the street? Excuse me, sir, come over here. Let me take a photo of your face and flip through my book of the people we've arrested in the last 12 months to see if you match. People would be in absolute uproar if our police services decided doing that. But as long as it's automated, as long as it's all behind the scenes, it suddenly becomes fine. And they know this. They know it doesn't feel as authoritarian as, right, come here, sir, get your passport out, photo time. But it's exactly the same in effect and in principle. And in fact, it's worse because it is less accurate. So, quite frankly, facial recognition technology is Orwellian, it is fascist, and the Libertarian Party would completely stop the state from using it without people's consent.
Absolutely agreed. I mean, most people don't, when you ask them, especially when there's an opposition government in power, if they trust the state, I'm guessing the vast majority would say no. And yet, when it comes to scaremongering tactics, such as the online safety bill, which we should touch on now, it seems to work. Right, so let's touch on it. I mean, the online safety bill, as in it seems to work, people give up their own freedoms in exchange for protection from the state, which is crazy to me, because on one hand you don't trust them, on the other hand you want to give them more control mechanisms. So let's talk about some of these control mechanisms, that being the online safety bill. Now, I'm holidaying out in Thailand, but I still have my VPN connected to the UK. I don't know why, just to access all my services, all good. And I started noticing when I was logging into different platforms that they would ask me to upload ID, even X at one point, right? So the online safety bill, what it's saying to us is that it's trying to make the internet safer. That's how they get us, right? But where do you draw the line between protecting users and censoring speech? We've already seen some reports that the online safety bill has been used to censor speech. And can you explain why libertarians should be cautious of legislation aimed at online safety? What might be the unintended consequences?
So those who would give up liberty for security deserve neither. And that's precisely what the Online Safety Act is leading us towards. If we start with the reasons behind it, keeping children safe online. Now, it is a serious issue, the kind of material that children are accessing. There is very, 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 very little that can justify the censorship and surveillance of an entire population, which is what the Online Safety Act does. There already exist tools to keep children safe online. For example, parenting. Take the smartphone off them, put on the parental blocks. You can block the pornography without the use of state censorship, which is what the Online Safety Act does. Do I believe that some, at least, of the politicians who voted this in did so from a genuine belief that they want to protect children? Yes, I do. I accept that. But I believe that the vast majority of them have not considered the unintended consequences that you have mentioned. I believe it was unforgivable to pass the bill when there are provisions within it that go far, far beyond protecting children. The powers, for example, that they've given to Ofcom to censor material, the demands placed upon social media companies. This legislation is right of the sort of kind that you would find in communist China or Putin's Russia. In fact, much of the legislation, if you translate the digital laws passed in Russia and the Online Safety Act, and you compare the two documents side by side, it's really quite shocking how similar they are. So the Online Safety Act is sold to us as protecting children. That's the way they can say, oh, well, you want your privacy, you must be a nonce, is essentially what they said to Farage the other day. Like as we discussed earlier, privacy in itself has value. You need to have incredibly good reasons to give up privacy to the state. Arguably, protecting children is a good enough reason. But that doesn't explain then why we've got in the same bill loads and loads of provisions for Ofcom, as I mentioned earlier, to essentially take a black marker over the half of the internet. We've had Wikipedia last week launched a court challenge because the Online Safety Act now requires that contributors to Wikipedia identify themselves. If we just consider that for the moment, the British government is asking an online encyclopedia to identify contributors. Every time they write an article, you must give up your identity to the state.
So what's that got to do with pornography?
Exactly, nothing. So, the protecting children is how they're selling it to us. But the actual implications of the act are far more severe. So we've got protecting children is the one sales pitch. The other one is fighting crime, fighting terrorists. It's the same way they justify facial recognition. If you don't like what we're doing, you either are you're a paedophile or you're a terrorist, is essentially what the Labour Party have been saying, and the Conservatives to a great extent. The hypocrisy is really beginning to, as the youth say, get on my tits now, with a lot of Conservatives have come out of the woodwork criticising the Online Safety Act. They've even had the gall on X. There is now a Conservative Libertarians group, which talks about abolishing the Online Safety Act, about cutting taxes, essentially about doing the reverse of Conservative policy for the last decade. I'm not quite sure what they think they're going to achieve with that. It's like, communists calling for a free market. But anyway, back to the point. So it's sold to us as protecting children and stopping terrorists. Why then censor Wikipedia? Why remove the speeches of parliamentarians? There was a Conservative MP was speaking in Parliament. Her speech was put online and taken down the day after the new dictates of the Online Safety Act came into force. And one of the biggest things that worries me, is this a symptom of the social media age? Is it a symptom of a lack of engagement in politics? I'm not sure what the causes are, But as far as I'm concerned, in a healthy democracy, you would have hundreds of thousands of people out on the street the day after this kind of Orwellian legislation is passed. And we're very happy we're doing so. As we're filming this, the date of our Online Safety Act protest is tomorrow. So by the time this goes online, that would have happened. And I hope we can make an impact. So we will have, at the moment, we have under 100 people confirmed, well under. We'll see if other people join us. We've advertised online. But the point I'm trying to make is if you actually look at the Online Safety Act, what it allows for, the British public have been completely supine. They have rolled over with this level of state surveillance. And as far as I'm concerned, the government has lost their legitimacy to govern because they are no longer democratic. They have built a totalitarian surveillance state with this legislation.
But then, Alex, what's the rebuttal then? Because people with different ideologies might listen to what we're saying and say something similar to what they said to Farage. So in the sense that, okay, you don't want the state to monitor something like child pornography, therefore you must be for that. Right. So what is the libertarian perspective? From my understanding, it is that we are against child pornography, of course, 100%. But what we're saying is that the onus of responsibility should be with parents, the community members, family members, perhaps the child themselves, as in the parents teaching them, and so forth, versus the state monitoring the usage of the family, the child, the parent. So what is the libertarian perspective? If we do not have the Online Safety Act, what is there in replacement in order to protect children from pornography?
Well, you've said it yourself, parents. Parents are the primary protectors of their children, arguably the only protectors. The state has no business in getting involved in parenting. A potential rebuttal that you might see is, okay, but some parents are a bit rubbish, and some of them are. I've met some of them myself. Then there does become a serious, okay, right, do we need to censor the net to protect children from pornography? And I would argue that still censoring the net is morally reprehensible. It relies on the means justify the ends type of relativist thinking. As long as we can stop child porn, children watching pornography, so on and so forth, anything goes. That's what the position is, if you believe that the Online Safety Act is the right way forward. We cannot have a situation in which the state monitors every single citizen interaction online. We just cannot have it, full stop. There needs to come a point where you say, yes, there's a lot of evil in the world, but you don't fight it by creating more evil, which is what state censorship is. It is an evil. It is an affront to the dignity and the sovereignty of the individual. So in terms of protecting children, the first point of call needs to be the parents. And there exist and have existed for years tools that already work towards this, such as blocking content filters online. An interesting one to go with, the party doesn't have a policy on this as of yet, but personally I believe banning smartphones for under 16s is probably a good thing. Arguably, again, parental choice, so on and so forth. But the internet has done a lot of damage to young minds. That doesn't justify surveilling it and censoring it for adults. That's our position.
Very well. And so let's say this goes unchecked, Alex, right? Maybe, and hopefully not, right? We're here today trying to make a difference. But let's say we can't, and the surveillance state progresses over the next 10 to 20 years. What are we going to be looking at? Like, what's the most alarming scenario that you envision from a progressing surveillance state?
So I would argue, Dylan, that unfortunately, I believe we've already crossed the Rubicon. I believe that we already live in an established surveillance state. The reason being is that we have abandoned, we discussed this earlier, we have abandoned entirely in law the principle of innocent until proven guilty. How have we abandoned that? Facial recognition technology treats you as a criminal for the crime of walking down the street. The Online Safety Act requires social media companies to monitor what you say online. The Apple encryption saga, WhatsApp, 4chan, the list goes on. So the state has already abolished all pretense of operating under liberal democratic norms that we have done for the last century. So in that sense, the Rubicon has been crossed in that privacy is no longer, at least in the Labour Party, the Conservative Party, maybe to a slightly lesser extent the Liberal Democrats, but I mean they're irrelevant. They've all abandoned the principle of privacy and innocence until proven guilty. So now it's just a question of how much further the technology can progress, because the checks and balances have been completely removed. And there are a couple of things that we can look at to make a couple of predictions. I'm not a futurist. I don't know exactly how things are going to go. But if we look at China, where facial recognition is rolled out on an incredible scale, they've had their version of the Online Safety Act for the best part of 15 years now. And in China, I'm sure many of the viewers will have heard of the social credit score, where everything you do is monitored. If you do good things, such as donating blood or litter picking, you get points from the government. Sounds like a good plan. That's going to make everyone into an upstanding citizen, isn't it? And if you do bad things, such as criticize Xi Jinping on Weibo or cross the street on a red light, you are deducted social credit points. Everyone says that couldn't possibly happen here. Well, look at Keir Starmer. Look at Yvette Cooper. Look at the kind of people who have brought us legislation, to be fair, they didn't bring us to the Online Safety Act, but who have enacted legislation such as the Online Safety Act, who are quite happy to scan all of our faces, who are quite happy to throw people in prison for 31 months for writing something stupid on Twitter. This is the government that we have already in the United Kingdom. So if we look at how the technology might progress, digital ID will be the next one. We've done the Online Safety Act, tick, facial recognition, tick, digital ID. I'm going to say 6 to 8 months, maybe a bit sooner, we'll see. I'm sure you can put a bet on it somewhere. Anyway, the point is, if you combine a digital ID with the Online Safety Act, with facial recognition technology, and with CBDC, exactly, central bank digital currency, then you've built a social credit system in all but name. So digital currency, soon enough they will abolish.
Alex, just to double down on your point, I saw online, I don't know if it's confirmed, but maybe you can confirm with me if it's propaganda or not, but apparently in October there's going to be checks on any transfers of £800 or more between friends and family, and the settlement will take 24 hours while checks are carried out on all transactions. And what I saw is that it's coming into effect in 1 October. Have you heard anything? Is that similar to what you're saying, whereby if they're monitoring our social activities, like our faces, where we're going, they can tie it to us as a person via our ID, and then also then track it back to our bank accounts and affect our transactions? Are we already there? Is essentially what you're saying?
Well, I've got to be honest with you, I've not heard about this £800 surveillance of transactions, but you've successfully terrified me.
Yeah.
That doesn't surprise me at all. I haven't heard of it. Please do send me the link after this episode. But all I can say on that is I'm not surprised, because at the moment it's a little bit of a pain for the state to do this sort of surveillance. You know, they have to look into your bank account, so on and so forth. When they bring in digital currency, then you have, you know, an automatically programmable currency. They will be able to immediately from the source determine what you can and can't spend that money on. Whether you can, for example, gift it to friends.
So for now, they have to go through your bank, whereas if they launch a CBDC, they just bypass the bank and just... Okay, gotcha.
It's absolutely done. You know, at the moment we have money. We can talk about fiat currency another time, but we have money, we have cash. And if you want to give some money to your relatives, so on and so forth, you transfer it, then, you know, most of the time that's that. But when they bring in digital ID and central bank digital currency, every single transaction is automatically logged. There doesn't need to be any suspicion for them to ask your bank to see the details, so on and so forth. Everything is automatic. And we have now the computing power and the capacity to literally write down every single economic transaction that takes place at every single second at every single location in the country. And that's what they want. So what we're faced with is a future in which every single thing that you purchase or transfer is monitored. And if you combine that with facial recognition technology, we're going to see fines immediately taken from your account. So let's say there's another pandemic and we have another Orwellian lockdown. You decide, I'm not going to abide by this, I do not consent, and you go for a walk to the local park. Your face is scanned by one of these cameras. Bang, 60 quid's taken out of your bank account or whatever it might have been immediately. No recourse through appeal because they've scanned your face, you were there, and your money's not really yours because it belongs to the central bank. So what this does is that it creates the Chinese social credit system. You don't need to say you've got one. Keir Starmer can go on pretending that we live in a liberal democracy and how he'd never do anything like that. But that's exactly the way that we're heading. When your money is no longer yours.
Even if it's not Keir Starmer, like for listeners, like people that, they might support Keir, if we manage to get any of those type of listeners. Just imagine the worst possible opposition government with the worst leader coming in and having access to those control mechanisms is essentially what libertarians fear. You might have 40 trustworthy, stellar human beings, and then one person comes in, or one administration comes in and has access to those control mechanisms, and the pain that they'll bring about from that is not worth the safety that comes with it. Is that essentially what we're saying and what people should be aware of, Alex?
Absolutely. So I would temper that with a little bit of saying it's not just the risk of a future totalitarian government. I do believe that we have crossed the Rubicon towards one already, and I do believe that the actions of this administration are authoritarian in a great regard. Is the current government as bad as the Chinese Communist Party or as authoritarian regimes from the past, fascist or communist? Arguably, no. So then we turn to the argument that you mentioned, but what if in future such a regime was to come into power? And you're absolutely right. We've given them all of the tools and all of the infrastructure is there. We could play the book out in a number of scenarios. What could happen? We could potentially see a reform government in 4 years. Some people consider it likely. The polls consider it likely. It's still a long time away. Let's imagine we have a reform government that lurches further to the right. We've now got cameras everywhere and a digital currency for all of their libertarian leanings, which are certainly not that angular. You've got members of reform will quite happily use this surveillance state that Labour have built to monitor the population for dissent, perhaps a crackdown on certain groups. One of the ways it's sold to us, for some voters, it's protecting children. For other voters, it's cracking down on migration. And I'm sure there's plenty of reformists rubbing their hand, hang on, if we've got central bank digital currency and you can't buy anything without it, and we've got a facial recognition camera on every street corner, we'll catch all those illegals in an instant, is probably what half of them are thinking. Anyway, so back to the scenario. Let's say reform get in, and then there's a coup within reform and they launch even further to the right, and everyone is now mandated to wear the union flag as they leave the house and to sing the national anthem 5 times a day, whatever it might be. You've got no escape. You've got no escape because the socialists first built the surveillance state under Keir Starmer. The only solution is to dismantle it and replace it with a constitution, as the Libertarian Party proposes, which fundamentally maintains individual liberty at the core of everything this country should be.
Yes, great. So support libertarianism, vote libertarianism as a way out. We're coming up to the end of this episode. Alex, I know we're going to see you a lot more on the podcast as leader of the party, but is there anything that you would like to close out this episode specifically? One thing, perhaps to inspire or at least not be all doom and gloom for our fellow libertarianism?
So, we are mobilising. We are protesting against the Online Safety Act. We are challenging more seats. There is a Libertarian Party in the United Kingdom, an alternative that will dismantle this surveillance state. We all have an obligation to stand up and fight. And one thing they can't do to you yet is lock you in your home. They tried it under COVID, but they don't have the resources to keep you there. Come out and join us on our protests. Come out and do some leafleting. Get in contact with us. We're always up for more volunteers. Is it all doom and gloom? It doesn't have to be. Technology is a wonderful thing. Look at how the internet liberated millions of people around the world. helped foster democratic revolutions. Look at AI. Some of the benefits of this technology could be incredibly liberating. Blockchain technology. We have the ability to not just record what, Mr. and Mrs. Smith are buying, but what the state is spending our money on. We can flip this 180 degrees. We can flip it back on them as long as we repeal legislation such as the Online Safety Act, get our act together with mobilising, get a constitution, and we could have a really, really bright 21st century, one with prosperity, with peace, where technology works for the individual rather than against them. So please get in contact. All of the details will be shared. Libertarian Party, get us on Facebook, X, on the website, email us. Get involved because we are mobilizing. It is time for liberty.
Awesome. Yes, absolutely. Come and join us at protests. First commit your time in free methods, protests, listening to podcasts, looking at our posts, just familiarizing yourself with libertarianism. And then when you're ready, take the step. I'm a paying member of the Libertarian Party. So is Alex. And so, we would, of course, like you to be a part of us and grow this party so that we are in favor of liberty rather than all these other parties in favor of state and government control. All right, Alex, super nice to have you on the pod. Until next time, goodbye.
Thank you very much, Dylan. See you next time.